ahead, stay inspired. Follow us on all our social media platforms. Kwame Boakye, a 27-year-old Ghanaian graduate, had long dreamed of setting foot in the United States of America. Year after year, he filled out the American Diversity Visa lottery forms, backing it with prayers and the hope of one day experiencing the land he had admired through films and stories. Then, one blessed day, the news he had been waiting for finally came. Kwame had been selected. Wow! His heart overflowed with joy, and the entire village joined him in celebration. For Kwame, this wasn't just a stroke of luck. It was the key to the life he had always imagined for himself. Despite the excitement, reality didn't take long to hit. Kwame's family lived a simple life, barely managing to get by. The lottery only covered his visa. He still had to sort out money for the flight, accommodation, and the heavy costs of starting life in a foreign country. His mother parted with her cherished jewelry. His uncle went far as mortgaging a small piece of land, and the friends chipped in, giving whatever little they could afford. With tears in their eyes, his family stood by, waving him off as he boarded the plane, their hopes and prayers resting on his success in the so-called land of opportunities. Kwame stepped out of the airport, dragging his old bag along with him. The chilly air hit his face, making him shiver. There was nothing like the warm breeze at home. He glanced around, scanning the crowd, hoping to spot the man who had promised to pick him up. But after waiting for hours, there was no sign of him. Excitement gave way to worry. A taxi driver, noticing Kwame standing alone with a confused look, approached him. "Charlie, you need help?" the man asked with a kind smile. Kwame explained his situation, and the driver nodded. "I know a small motel close by. It's nothing fancy, but it's a safe place," he said. Left with no other option, Kwame agreed. The drive to the motel felt strange. He stared out the window, taking in the towering buildings and dazzling city lights. Everything seemed so massive and so fast, so different from the life he knew back home. When they got to the motel, it looked old and tired. The flickering sign outside gave off a weak glow, and the walls were marked with peeling paint. Inside, the man at the desk barely looked up as Kwame handed over his money and collected the keys. The room was small, old and uninviting. When Kwame sat on the bed, it creaked under his weight. He buried his face in his hand, overwhelmed and feeling lost. This wasn't how he imagined his first day in America to be. But as he laid on the bed staring at the cracked ceiling, he reminded himself of why he was here. He couldn't afford to give up now. Not after coming this far. Somewhere in this vast, unfamiliar city, his new life was waiting for him. 2 days later, Kwame's worst nightmare began. Early in the morning, a loud urgent banging on his motel door jolted him awake. His heart raced as he sat up, trying to make sense of the whole commotion. "Open up! Police!" a voice bellowed from outside. Before Kwame could even move, the door burst open with a deafening crash. Several police officers stormed in with their guns pointed directly at him. "Get on the ground, hands in the air," one of them barked. Kwame froze. No stand to respond. "Please, what's going on? I don't understand," he stammered. His voice was shaking with fear. "Oh, do it now," another officer yelled. So, with his tone sharp and unyielding, trembling, Kwame slowly knelt on the floor, with his hands raised above his head. In no time, they had him handcuffed. His mind was racing to figure out exactly what was happening. "Oh, wait, what did I do? Please tell me what's going on," Kwame pleaded, but his cries fell on deaf ears. As they dragged him out of the room, other guests peeped through their doors, whispering and staring. Kwame's face burned with shame and fear, his thoughts spinning out of control. At the police station, they led him into a small cold room and left him there alone. After what felt like hours, two detectives walked in and sat across from him, with their eyes studying him intently. "You are staying at Riverview Motel, right?" one of them finally asked. Kwame nodded cautiously. "Yes, that's where I am staying," he replied. "Do you know a man named Mr. Henderson? An older guy staying in a room near yours?" Kwame quickly shook his head. No, I don't know anyone there. I just arrived in this country. I don't know anybody." The detectives exchanged a look before the second leaned forward. "Well, Mr. Henderson was murdered early this morning." Kwame's eyes widened in disbelief. "Murdered?" he whispered. "Yes," the first detective said firmly. "And someone told us they saw you leaving his room at around the time it happened. What do you have to say about that?" Kwame's mouth went dry as panic gripped him. "Oh, that's not true," he said, shaking his head vigorously. "I didn't leave my room. I swear. I don't even know whom Mr. Henderson is." The detectives didn't look convinced. "So you are saying you weren't anywhere near his room?" one of them pressed, with his eyes narrowing down to Kwame. "I'm telling the truth," Kwame said desperately. His voice was cracking. "I don't even know anything about it. I didn't do anything." But their cold, skeptical expressions didn't change. They kept questioning him, with their voices sharp and relentless, while Kwame's eyes sank deeper with every word. Sitting there in that cold, lonely room, he felt completely helpless. He had no one to call and no one to back up his story. All he had wanted was a fresh start, but now it felt like his dreams were crumbling before his eyes. For the first time, Kwame wondered if coming to America had been the biggest mistake of his life. Kwame sat in the cold, dimly lit interrogation room with his hand trembling as he struggled to explain himself. "I beg you, I didn't do anything," he said, with his voice shaking with fear. "I was only walking around. I don't know anybody here." The detectives studied him, their expressions giving nothing away. One leaned forward, speaking in a low but firm tone. "Walking around where? Witnesses say they saw you near Mr. Henderson's room at the time of the murder." Kwame shook his head frantically. No. I wasn't near his room. I don't even know who he was or is. I don't know what you're talking about." His accent grew heavier with his panic, and the words came out broken and rushed. "Please, I didn't do this. I'm innocent." But the detectives didn't seem moved. One of them reached into a folder and pulled out a plastic evidence bag, tossing it onto the table. Inside was a knife. Its blade was stained with dried blood. Kwame's breath hitched as he stared at it. His eyes widened with disbelief. What is that?" he whispered, with his voice barely audible. "That's the murderer's weapon," the detective said bluntly. "We found it in your room, under your mattress." Kwame's chest tightened and his heart pounded so hard that it felt it was about to burst. "Oh, how it got there." His voice cracked with desperation as he looked in between the two detectives. "Somebody must have put it there. I swear I didn't do this." The second detective folded his arms, shaking his head. "You expect us to believe that?" he asked, his voice laced with doubt. "No alibi, no witnesses to back you up. And now you have this knife? Be serious, man. It's not looking good for you." Tears poured in Kwame's eyes, and his hands clenched into fists. His wrists still sore from the handcuff. "Please," he begged, his voice breaking down under the weight of his fear. "I didn't do this. I came into this country to look for a better life, not for trouble. I don't even know how and where it happened." But the detectives remained unmoved. They exchanged a brief look before one of them stood up. "Well, we've had enough," he said coldly, pushing his chair backwards. Kwame sat frozen in disbelief and asking himself how this could be happening. He had no family in this country, no lawyer, no one to fight for him. Everything he had dreamed of, all of the hope he carried with him to America, was slipping through his fingers. As the door slammed shut behind the detectives, the room grew unbearably quiet. Kwame lowered his head into his hands, with tears streaming down his face. The weight of the false accusations, the damning evidence he couldn't explain, and the loneliness of being so far from home pressed down on him. For the first time, he truly felt hopelessness of his situation. Kwame's trial was harsh and fast, leaving him with little chance to defend himself. Without money to hire a good lawyer, he was given a public defender who hardly seemed to care about his case. The prosecutor wasted no time painting Kwame as a desperate immigrant who turned to violence in search for quick cash. The witnesses' statements, along with the knife they found in his room, was more than enough to sway the jury. Kwame's tearful cries of innocence were ignored, his thick accent and broken English doing little to gain their sympathy. In the end, the verdict came down swiftly. Guilty of second-degree murder, the judge, with a stern face, sentenced him to 25 years in a maximum security prison. As the words sank in, Kwame's world shattered. Everything he had sacrificed, the dreams he had carried across the ocean, had even crashed in the courtroom. That felt like it was set against him from the start. Thank you for watching. Follow Derba Tales on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for updates and more amazing stories. See you next time.